Hey everybody, tonight I am making one of my go-to comfort meals, which is simple and just delicious. I could probably eat it once a week if I didn't get so distracted by everything else. And that is sauteed broccoli, teriyaki chicken, and white rice. So basic, so simple, and yet such a standby. So I grew this broccoli. The seeds were planted probably late March in the greenhouse to start, and then planted out probably close to 8 weeks later, 6 to 8 weeks after that. And it is now June 22nd. Yeah, that stem's a little woody on the end there. And you can see the top of this is just starting to open up. It's not flat. Can you see how that's starting to reach? That's a pretty good indication that it's going to seed. And so I needed to get it out of there. I actually have 2 more in my fridge that I picked last week, but I decided that I was going to cook this one because I knew this wasn't quite ready when I picked the other ones, and now it's almost too far gone. So I think the trickiest part with broccoli is trying to figure out when to pick it, because you want it to be as big as possible, and yet you wait and then it's a little bit too big or too far gone because it's starting to go to seed. And I could have saved those stems and peeled them with a potato peeler and shredded them up and done something with them, but I'm kind of flush with broccoli right now, so I'm not really looking to save every single itty bitty bit. I've got a lot. Most of it's gonna go into my freezer for meals later in the year, so I'm not trying to save every little bit. I can't remember the variety on this broccoli. I'll put it up on the screen. I used to grow Arcadia and Bay Meadows were my 2 favorite hybrid varieties, and both of those seeds have been discontinued. And so I'm trying out a couple of new ones. It's frustrating when you find something that really works well for your area and then they stop making it. Hybrid broccoli is worth doing, depending on where you live. Kind of the classic seed that you see in the big box stores all the time is Waltham, and that's an open pollinated variety, and I've had it do well for me depending on the climate. It does not do well for me here in Walla Walla. We're zone 7A. We tend to have a lot of late season frosts, and then it gets hot really fast. So we go from winter to spring to summer very quickly. Although this was the exception. This year has been surprisingly cool. But in those kind of situations, those traditional open pollinated varieties where you don't have a long spring are not always the best choice. And so sometimes a hybrid can be a better option. I am going to make a nice broccoli salad with one of those other heads because I do have a lot of it and I love a good broccoli salad. So look for that in an upcoming video. So broccoli was probably one of the first vegetables I ever actually learned to cook. I ate it quite a bit as a kid. We would have it for dinner, steamed with packaged cheese sauce, because that's just how we rolled in my house growing up. And I liked it, particularly because it had cheese sauce on it. And when I moved out of the house and started to learn to cook for myself, it was one of the few vegetables at the time that I actually liked enough to figure out how to try to cook it. And I'm not sure where I originally learned, probably a Sunset Magazine book. But I like it better stir-fried than I like it steamed. And so I'm just going to saute it. I've got a nice hot pan here with some olive oil. And honestly, this is way more broccoli than I really need. Maybe I'll just cook half of that and save the other half. And what I like to do is get the pan hot, give it a good stir, and then add just a tiny bit of water to the pan and put a lid over it and let it steam. And that way you get both the roasted saute happening, but also a little bit of steam, which helps cook the stew pretty quickly. But this is definitely a 101 recipe. Very simple. But everybody should know how to make a quick broccoli saute. And depending on my mood and how much energy I have and what else I have in the fridge, I will sometimes add sliced onions to this before I add the broccoli, or a handful of chopped bell pepper is a nice addition. But honestly, just plain old broccoli is fine. What I'm looking for here is to get a little bit of a char on some of these pieces, so let it sit on that hot bottom for a minute. And then because I'm doing teriyaki chicken, I'm going to add a little bit of sesame oil and a little bit of sesame seeds at the end of cooking. There we go. See how that's got a little bit of char on it? That's kind of what I'm looking for, is something like that. What'll happen is, if your pan is really hot, which this is, you'll get that char, but the broccoli will actually start to burn before it cooks all the way through and gets tender. Hence, adding a little bit of water. And we're just going to let that, this lid doesn't fit perfectly, but we're just going to let that steam for a minute or two. And I would estimate that was maybe a couple tablespoons of water. Not very much. I am going to add a little bit of red pepper flake to this as well. Totally optional. Oh, and then obviously, we need some salt. If you've got broccoli from the store and it's not super tasty, you can also add a pinch of sugar to your pan, and that will help sweeten it up and make it taste better. This is beautiful garden broccoli, so it doesn't really need it, but a little bit of sugar is not a bad addition. And I mean a little bit of sugar, like less than the salt. And I like my broccoli to be tender, but still have a little bit of bite to it. I don't want it to be totally sogged out. So it's kind of a fine line here. But honestly, it doesn't take long. And it's just such a great side with just about everything. Still one of my very favorite vegetables. Notice how that water has totally evaporated. And you can hear that it's gone back to frying and not steaming. That's what we want. And, you know, I don't get it perfect every single time. Sometimes it's a little too cooked. Sometimes it's a little undercooked. And that's okay. It's still good, no matter what. Yeah, I think that's about it. We'll turn our heat off. Plate up the rest of our meal.